discovering 247 emails detailing a conspiracy between my wife and her paramour, aimed at financially ruining me during our divorce, left no room for doubt. The ensuing 10 minutes in court would reshape everything. My name is Nathan Bradshaw, aged 42, a thriving commercial real estate developer in Atlanta. For the past 15 years, I had believed my marriage to Christine, whom I met at college, was solid. We boasted a charming house in Buckhead, prosperous professions, and reverence within our community. I single-handedly constructed my development company while Christine ascended to senior vice president at a marketing firm. However, fissures emerged last winter. Christine grew detached, frequently engrossed in her phone, working late hours relentlessly. Recognizing the red flags from countless TV dramas, I chose not to entertain suspicions. Instead, I convinced myself it was mere work-related tension. In her line of work, she had secured a major client and took charge of the account. Given these circumstances, it was understandable that she would be preoccupied. But then there was Valentine's Day. I had booked a table at her preferred restaurant, Bacchanalia, and spent weeks planning the perfect night to rekindle our connection, reminding ourselves of the reasons we fell in love. Upon arriving home early with flowers, I found an empty house and a message on my phone stating she would work late, suggesting we celebrate over the weekend instead. I stayed seated in our living room with the wilting flowers on the coffee table, and suddenly something within me snapped. This was no longer about suspicion. It was about acknowledging the truth. For 6 months, I had been making excuses for her distance, her coldness, and her canceled plans, feeling more like a roommate than a spouse. I ascended to her home office. Christine was always particular about security. Every device was password protected, and she was diligent about logging out and shutting down her laptop. On that day, she had hurriedly departed, leaving her laptop untouched on her desk with a dark screen. I tapped the mouse pad, illuminating it. She was still logged in, and I felt compelled to uncover the truth, so I opened her email. The inbox appeared routine, containing work-related matters, purchase confirmations, newsletters. However, Christine was meticulous. Every item had a designated folder or label. As I navigated through folders, I categorized them by client names, personal items by category, bills, and finances. Then I came across one labeled private. Inside were 247 emails dating back 8 months, all between Christine and Douglas Parrish, a name I was unfamiliar with. I began reading the emails, which initially contained flirtatious exchanges and deniable compliments about presentations and inside jokes about colleagues. However, they grew bolder, discussing prearranged lunch meetings that evolved into extended hotel visits. Through 50 emails, they discussed their mutual feelings about being together, expressing that fate had brought them together and that their spouses didn't comprehend them. I felt queasy, yet I continued to read in order to fully grasp the situation at hand. Douglas Parrish, the new CFO of her firm, had joined 8 months prior, coinciding with Christine's behavioral change. Married with 2 children attending private school and residing in Ansley Park, it appeared that Douglas was as entangled in this affair as Christine. However, the emails that caught my attention began around December, transitioning from romantic exchanges to strategic planning. Christine forwarded articles regarding divorce law in Georgia to Douglas. They conversed about asset division, alimony calculations, and methods for maximizing her settlement. In response, Douglas provided spreadsheets assessing the value of my company, my personal accounts, the equity in our home. They were preparing not just for an affair, but a divorce. Their plan encompassed the financial dismantling of everything involved. One email from Christine detailed her intentions. She would file a claim alleging emotional neglect and distance, cite instances where work took priority over our marriage, demand half the house value and alimony, claiming she had forsaken career advancements for my entrepreneurial pursuits, which was untrue as her career was never dependent on mine. Douglas's replies were calculated. He advised her on timing, suggested documenting everything, even recommended personal therapy to create a record of the emotional strain the marriage had inflicted on her. The most incriminating email was penned 3 weeks before Valentine's Day. In it, Christine proposed creating conflict and distance prior to filing. Douglas termed it constructing the narrative. I spent hours reading these emails until 3 a.m. In a move learned from 15 years in commercial real estate, I meticulously recorded everything. I established a new email account, forwarded each message to myself, saved them as PDFs with complete headers detailing dates and metadata. I captured screenshots of Christine's sent folder, ensuring the originals were untouched. I safeguarded all data on a cloud drive and an external hard drive before closing the laptop in its original state and retiring to the guest room for the night. At 2:30 a.m., I heard Christine in the hallway, her paws outside the guest room door, and her eventual entry into our bedroom without knocking or checking on me. The following morning, I maintained normalcy, brewed coffee, inquired about her work emergency, proposed rescheduling Valentine's Day, which seemed to ease her. She affectionately kissed my cheek and declared her love before leaving for work. Later that day, I contacted my attorney. For years, Richard Moss managed my business contracts, a skilled attorney with an unyielding strategist approach. No tolerance for games, he was the best. I divulged every detail to him: emails, the affair, divorce strategy, the lot. After reading through the files, Richard stayed silent for quite some time. Then he provided the necessary advice. We wouldn't confront Christine immediately. Instead, we'd let her initiate action, following through with her previously outlined plan in the emails, as it was predicated on me being surprised, bewildered, and defenseless. If she knew I had the emails, she would adapt her strategy. However, if we allowed her to step into her own trap, we'd have undeniable evidence against her. For the subsequent 6 weeks, I played the role Christine anticipated: the detached husband, the engrossed workaholic, the man oblivious to his crumbling marriage. Ironically, it was less challenging than expected because my indifference towards her was genuine. I grinned when required, declared "I love you" as expected, and observed her constructing her argument against me. She began therapy in March's early days, returning home discussing self-improvement and understanding her desires. I deduced from her emails that this was Douglas's plan to create professional records of her emotional state. She instigated an argument over my absence at her company dinner. In truth, I had a genuine work issue, a zoning hearing scheduled well in advance. She launched an attack, accusing me of always prioritizing work over her, claiming that I was more married to business than to her. The entire display was as per her email's script. I apologized, attempted to rectify the situation, acted remorseful. She likely recorded it all. On April Fool's Day, she filed for divorce. A process server handed me the papers at my office in front of 3 clients, a move both humiliating and calculated. The petition delivered everything her emails had promised. She sought the house, asserted she relinquished her career, demanded alimony, and portrayed him as an emotionally absent workaholic. The defendant, he contested everything and requested a court hearing, with a preliminary conference slated for May 15th, granting 7 weeks for preparation. 3 days after serving him, Christine departed, taking her belongings, our pet, and left a note stating she would reside with a friend and that Margaret Chen, an attorney from one of Atlanta's leading family law firms, would manage all communication. I deduced from the emails that the friend was Douglas. He had leased an apartment in Midtown using his name, providing a shared residence without hinting at an affair partner. The subsequent 7 weeks were the longest in my life. I returned from work each day to an empty house, spending hours in anticipation. Richard was constructing our defense, primarily waiting for Christine's presentation, unaware of the impending developments. The initial hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday at Fulton County Superior Court. I wore my finest suit, arrived half an hour early, and discussed strategy with Richard in the hallway one last time before entering. Christine arrived with Margaret Chen and 2 junior lawyers from her firm, an overabundance for a preliminary hearing, but Chen preferred to assert herself. Confident and composed, Christine seemed prepared to present her case. She paid no heed to me as we entered the courtroom, Judge Patricia Winters presiding. For 2 decades, Judge Winters had been a figure known for her unwavering fairness and intolerance for games from either party. She scrutinized the submitted documents before addressing both parties. Directing Chen to speak first, she inquired about Christine's stance. Margaret Chen rose, commencing her argument. She depicted me as a detached, emotionally aloof spouse who prioritized business over marriage. She referred to Christine's therapy sessions and letters from friends confirming her prolonged unhappiness. She submitted proof of my demanding work schedule, missed events, and instances of alleged systematic emotional neglect. Her speech was compelling. If I hadn't known it was fabricated, I might have been convinced myself. Chen concluded by reaffirming the settlement terms and stating that, given the length of the marriage and Christine's sacrifices, her demands were not excessive. Judge Winters jotted down notes as she listened. Then Richard addressed her. In the courtroom, Mr. Moss rose, fastened his coat, and uttered words I will always recall. For honor's sake, he wished to introduce evidence that would drastically alter this trial. He passed a folder to the usher who delivered it to the judge. Judge Chen looked puzzled, as presenting such materials was uncommon during a preliminary hearing, which were typically just summaries before the discovery process. Judge Winters unfolded the folder. Inside lay printouts of 50 emails, meticulously selected from the larger collection. Richard had chosen those most incriminating, detailing the planning of an affair and the strategy for divorce. The financial calculations, Christine's detailed blueprint for creating marital strife to bolster her case, filled the courtroom with a palpable silence as Judge Winters read. I watched Christine's countenance. Initially, she seemed bewildered, then worried as the judge continued reading. Then her eyes grew wide when she comprehended the contents. Christine faced Margaret Chen, who raised a hand while scanning through pages passed by the judge. The attorney's countenance shifted from assured to apprehensive, then to outright anger, as Judge Winters read aloud for 8 minutes without pause. She eventually placed the papers on the table and removed her spectacles, fixing Christine with a stern gaze. "Are these your emails, Mrs. Bradshaw?" Christine spoke softly. "I require consultation with my legal representative. That's not what I requested." "Are these emails sent from your account to Douglas Parrish?" The judge demanded a simple answer. Christine looked at Margaret Chen, who seemed eager to be elsewhere. "Yes, I did," Christine replied as Judge Winters picked up an email dated January 14th and read, "You wrote, 'Establish distance and conflict before filing, start picking fights, document his reactions, build the narrative of neglect.'" "Did you compose that?" inquired Christine's lawyer. "That document from February 3rd discussing financial strategies for optimizing your divorce settlement with Mr. Parrish, detailing methods to undervalue Mr. Bradshaw's business contributions and exaggerate your career sacrifices. Did you write it?" Judge Winters cast a look at Margaret Chen that conveyed both sympathy and disappointment. "I suppose you weren't aware of this evidence or its content, Ms. Chen, but your client certainly was, as she had planned it." Recess granted, 30 minutes. The judge departed from the bench. Margaret Chen forcefully pulled Christine into the corridor, and I heard heated arguments beyond the door. It appeared that Chen was scolding her client for fabricating evidence, making Chen look foolish in court. Richard remained seated, quietly organizing his papers without uttering a word. We both understood the impending situation. 20 minutes later, Margaret returned alone, approaching Richard and asking for a private conversation. They exited, leaving me alone in the courtroom. I listened as the clock ticked, reminding me of Christine's downfall, mirroring my own. 5 minutes before Judge Winters resumed, Richard returned, adjusted his tie, and simply said, "Finished." The judge reclaimed his position. "Ms. Chen," he asked, "has your client's stance shifted?" Margaret stood, visibly strained by the professional cost. "After examining the evidence and consulting with my client, we propose to abandon our current demand for a settlement and strive for a fair distribution of assets instead, Your Honor." However, Judge Winters was not receptive. A more equitable division. She deemed this as unacceptable due to the fraudulent actions committed by Ms. Chen's client in court. This involved manipulating evidence of marital strife to support false claims during a divorce proceeding. Judge Winters viewed such behavior as both unethical and potentially criminal, addressing Christine directly. In her ruling, Judge Winters denied every request made in the petition. The house will continue to belong to Mr. Bradshaw. The business valuation presented by Ms. Chen is rejected. Alimony was also denied. Mrs. Bradshaw will only receive what Georgia law mandates for asset division in a marriage of this duration, given that infidelity has been documented. Mr. Moss was instructed to file an amended response containing his client's proposed settlement. Lastly, Ms. Chen attempted one more time, asking for the chance to reject Judge Winters' decision. This hearing is now concluded. Following court session, it required merely 12 minutes post-recess to demolish Christine's elaborate strategy. 12 minutes witnessed her meticulously planned scheme crumble under the burden of her own evidence. Exiting the courtroom with Richard, we remained silent until we reached his vehicle. Upon reaching, he chuckled. With over 4 decades in law practice, Nathan, I had never encountered someone sink their own case that swiftly. The comprehensive settlement was finalized 3 weeks later, but it was merely a formality. Christine retained her personal possessions, automobile, and retirement fund. No house, no alimony, no stake in my enterprise. The divorce was legally completed on June 8th. Learned later that Douglas Parrish's wife too filed for divorce. Seems copies of the same emails were circulated, though I never identified the sender. Douglas's separation process was neither swift nor tidy. His wife was more enraged and had superior legal representation. Twice after the hearing, Christine attempted to contact me, but I chose not to respond. An email arrived requesting a conversation, which I had Richard reply stating all communication should be channeled through lawyers. A letter followed at my residence, expressing regret over the escalation and acknowledging mistakes, but persisting in concern for me. Without reading beyond the opening line, I discarded it. Later, mutual acquaintances reported that Christine and Douglas had separated. It seems a romance built on deception and breach of trust struggles to endure under the weight of costly divorces and shattered reputations. Surprising, isn't it? I parted with the house in Buckhead. Its memories were too intense, and extra space was unnecessary. In its place, I acquired a contemporary condo in West Midtown, boasting floor-to-ceiling windows offering a city vista. I embarked on a fresh start in a personal sanctuary. My enterprise is flourishing. It appears eliminating a spouse, actively working to devalue. My company contributes significantly to expansion. This year, we finalized 2 significant transactions and delved into commercial real estate in Nashville and Charlotte. Around November, I resumed dating, though nothing substantial has materialized thus far. I'm not adverse to the notion, however. I've become notably more cautious about whom I trust and am better at identifying warning signs, a skill honed from therapy as chronicled by Christine to illustrate how the marriage harmed her. Post-divorce, I opted for personal counseling not due to my own trauma, but to comprehend why I disregarded warning signs for so long. My therapist has helped me recognize my propensity towards conflict avoidance, willing to accept explanations rather than seeking uncomfortable truths. People often ask if I'm resentful, but in reality, I'm not. Anger arises when something unexpected occurs or someone breaches trust without prior notice. I do not feel this way. Weeks prior, Christine's entire scheme was detailed in her own words, which I foresaw. I was ready when the time came, equipping myself accordingly. My reaction wasn't anger but strategy. The insight I gained isn't centered on marriage or divorce or even deceit. It underscores the might of information and the necessity to remain composed under duress. Christine believed she was playing chess while I was playing checkers, thinking herself several moves ahead and carefully laying her traps. However, she overlooked a crucial rule. Keep evidence of your misdeeds, for such documents will ultimately convict you. I found a single folder on her laptop that contained 247 emails she believed were private and secure, records of her secretive strategy sessions with her lover. Unbeknownst to her, I had viewed them, copied them, and handed them over to my attorney, who then presented them in court for the judge to read out loud, a process taking just 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, her elaborate scheme unraveled. Watching Judge Winters recite Christine's own words to her, a period of 10 minutes during which her lawyer recognized the deception and was left looking inept. 10 minutes that enlightened Christine about the snare she had unwittingly stepped into. Emerging from the courthouse, I retained my business, assets, self-respect, and a keen awareness of whom I had been dealing with. In contrast, Christine exited with nothing but the repercussions of her own scheming. At times, justice isn't about retaliation or vengeance, but rather allowing individuals to experience the natural fallout of their own actions. Christine intended to bankrupt me through fabricated proof and deceit. Ironically, her recorded evidence was what brought about her downfall. The case concluded swiftly, faster than the time it takes to place an order for food. I didn't need to act aggressively, emotionally, or vindictively. I merely had to be astute enough to understand the significance of those emails when I discovered them, patient enough to allow her to carry out her plan, and prepared enough to reveal the truth at the crucial moment. The divorce was finalized in 10 minutes, because Christine spent 8 months gathering the evidence that would bring it about. All I had to do was appear and deliver the evidence to the judge. At 42 years old, I'm single, running a prosperous business, living in a home I cherish, and constructing a life built on trustworthy foundations with people I genuinely trust. Christine, at 41, is also single, residing in a rental apartment, working for another firm after her reputation suffered, and learning the bitter lesson that deception carries consequences. I found one folder and it altered everything. If given the chance, I would make the same move again. That's the story. There were no dramatic confrontations, no heated arguments, no public displays. Information, tactics, patience, and the law functioning appropriately when faced with indisputable proof of deceit. Subscribe for additional tales about treachery, justice, and the advantage of staying 3 steps ahead. Click the bell for notifications. Share a comment if you've ever uncovered something that altered everything. I read every single one. And remember, the truth ultimately reveals itself. Sometimes you simply need to know where to search for it.